let's talk about Planar Compass, issues 1 to 3 by D.M. Wilson, Sarah Brunt, and others. These are old school essentials compatible or designed for use with, as it says on the front of them. Planar adventure books, they're zines, which are meant to cover the sort of a custom planar setting. That's obviously meant to be, in the best, this is not an insult, it's an off-brand planescape. It's meant to be a sort of, hey, you go out to the Astral Sea and you can go to different planes, and there's stuff in the Astral Sea to do. I don't have issue 1 in hard copy. Issue 3 just arrived in hard copy at my house. There's issue 2. We'll get to these as we go. There's issue 3. We start with, it's nice, there's inspirations including some less likely names: David and Monty Cook, Jeff Grubb, Aaron Alston, Richard Baker, Rob Heinzu. Also some fiction: Alfred Bester, N.K. Jemisin, Naomi Novik, Jack Kirby, Frank Frazetta in terms of art. Obviously Kirby an artist as well. The first issue, let's just sum up what the issues are. I'll go through these as I do when I look at zines. The first one is issue 1 is a entry point to the planes with an adventure attached. It's got classes which are BX classes, they're old school essentials classes. Got psionic powers, and then it ends. The second one is has a list of the planes, the multiverse in brief, so that is your kind of summary of all the planes. It then has some extra monsters. It has rules for ships and sailing, some magic items, a whole system, a special system for astral sailing using hex flowers, and it has a dungeon if you're swallowed by a big astral monster, and it has adventure hooks. And the third issue is about the plane of Ordo, and its portal town, if we're talking Planescape. So it has some more classes, it has spells, it has a town and locations within the town, and then it has a number of locations if you go into the plane of Ordo itself, which is the kind of, it's Mechanis, it's lawful. Let's go then. So yeah, you can see that there's some content there. So in issue 1 you get Dreamhaven, tells you what you need. You get Dreamhaven and you get an adventure to do with it. This is levels 1 to 3 with low emphasis on encounter balance. As such, there are many moments in the zine that can quickly kill characters. So there is a kind of these things are, in a sense, they're always worth repeating because you never know what is someone's first old school book. But it reminds me a little bit, because I'm thinking, who's the core audience for these specialized products? People already in the scene. And it reminds me of people writing their Heartbreaker and then having a page on what a role-playing game is. You know, you're like, no, the only people reading this, the 30 people who will play your game already know what a role-playing game is. It has a big, something that might change the campaign. It has a hedge maze. It has ways you could use it. Just very basic, good setups for how to get going. And what I like, these are, I should say, they're nicely produced books. They're not super posh or anything, but they look good. The full colour is good. I'd say the art in general is good. Look, Clockwork Beetles. It's they look good. Basically, the art internally is good. Generally speaking, it's pleasing to the eye. And the general presentation in issue 1 is good. Lots of the old school essentials bullet pointing, and I will pick this up probably once or twice more because I think it can go quite badly wrong. Very old school's essential house style, and they even mention it kind of relates to the house style. So the first one is in the middle of the Astral Sea, which is a dark waters of psychic energy. So that's the concept. Psychic storms, etc., etc. The big black psychic, and then in the middle there is something that's shaped like a hand. This is because it's from a celestial, and a pirate has kind of ended up making. Well, he wrecks a cargo ship carrying mead, and he decides to sell them the mead rather than kill them, this ex-pirate. So he becomes the leader of this town. And there's a bit of secrets about it. There's species of note. This is obviously a core part of the setting, the sense that they're not just humans or whoever else, but there's other things. Onorks, these are obviously Scro. This is one thing. The Astral Sea planescape is obviously, which is the current canon planescape, is a Spelljammery planescape as well. Hence why it is currently actually Spelljammer. Spelljammer is set on the Astral Sea, and I think, which is not how it is in AD&D, of course. But yeah, the Onork in that sense are obviously a sort of Scro thing. They are orc types. Aldhelsi are a sort of elf type, strange short psionic fae. Belsoriso are raccoons. Skulgers are skinny goblins with heads that look like deer skull. There's one. And Chanicoids are clockwork beings. We get more about those in issue 3 particularly. And then humans. Stuff about time. This comes up more in, I think, maybe both issues 2 and 3. But there's this thing, they end up with an annoying custom time system, which is a 21-hour day. Which, I say that annoying. I kind of like custom calendars, I kind of like custom time systems, but I also kind of hate them because, of course, you just forget to use them properly because they're not like what you're used to, and the fewer things you have to fully adapt to in the secondary fiction, the easier it is to adapt. So you have, here's a map. This is, I think, clear enough, but there's a sign here that occasionally we will run into, call it layout and art over usability, rather than just a simple map. It's I think there is a player map, I might be in here too, but yeah, it's not necessarily ideal, but it's fine. Here's a thing, so yeah, the docks, it has, this is fine, so it describes the docks and says some people who might be there. You can get rumours there. There is a secret, and the secret is that it gets into the Deep Warren, and there is a hook. The hook, of course, is separate from the rumour here, and again, this will come up even in this issue, that there's a couple of times where the way the info is laid out means that I think it's meant to be stream of consciousness intuitive, where you're reading through and you go like, oh, what would I need to know next? We think about this in board game instructions, actually, the difference between case number systems, which classically war game rulebooks are, versus programmed instructions, which of various kinds, which often Eurogames are. Not that they are less nerdy than they may be, but it's very much more like, oh, this is what you need to do now in the game. A sense that you kind of give people the stuff they need as they need it, rather than explaining it all systematically and saying, well, look, read the whole 20-page rulebook first, learn the rules. This is the thing. So the Onork, obviously, the Onork, I guess, they are orky, but you can also see them as tieflingy. Here you've got Erntar, the Old Helsey, and Breaker, the Onork, who's Cyan, apparently. They are friends. It's a classic little and large combination, very transgressive. The Slipstream Bar, here's the pub. There's a rumour. There's a secret, which is that Paleo has a ship as well, has some locals, a 12th level human magic user who can teleport you, Lamrak, who is a bard, and Gemini Ballway, who is I guess a human knight but is reclusive. Some hooks, and there's a job for Leonid. There's a chant. This is the thing, I'm not actually sure. I need to, I'll double check when we get there. But here, the fact that it's sort of stream of consciousness means that Leonid's job is not attached to Leonid's entry. And here, the idea that there's limited offerings, I guess it might be natural to put it in here. But I suddenly think, it might be useful to have a set of hooks at the top as well. Paleo One Eye. Some, special drink. That's always fun to have, I like special drinks, special mushrooms, special whatever it is in a local area. Here we have more stuff about Leonid. This is about his room, other rooms you can hire. The bazaar and 2 people. There's a blacksmith and a humanoid tortoise guy. So yeah, mostly I actually think this is pretty usable as a small settlement. It's not very detailed, you know. It's got 3 merchants. It reminds me a bit, and I wonder if this was an inspiration at all, but it reminds me a bit of some of the entries in something called Platt's Starport Guide for Star Wars D6 role-playing game, which had everything from Byblos and, is it Kalan? Be a couple of massive Imperial ports down to Port Haven, Galgila, Freeport, you know, these smuggler havens on strange islands and or in a swamp or something. Just this kind of very small thing. It's something which, given it is the hub of your Astral Sea adventure, this is essentially your sigil, sigil. This is your sigil, and you sort of think, maybe this should have more. But it's a zine format. Who am I to complain? Entry from an almanac. Here's the adventure. The adventures, some of them are connected, most of them connected, in fact. So you have an issue. There's an issue with the pantry. Then that means you go to the warehouse. You find there might be a problem. And that might lead you into the Deep Warren. There's some Raz and the Raz King's realm. So you have an option to get into the Deep Warren that way. Then Lamorak, or Leonid and Lamorak kind of get you involved in this thing to do with getting a Sphinx's feather, and you need to do something there. But then there's a problem with a ship where are they Belsarissos are messing around and throwing bottles around, and these bottles have so yeah, you've got the details, and then the bottles have weird things in it, one of which the gelatinous Lusker one my players fought. So yeah, you see again the stream of consciousness adventure telling. This kind of works okay, but yeah, and the actual thing is fine. It's all fairly humdrum, you know. Oh, there's a problem with this because of this. Oh, this might tell you more about the secrets. You get caught up in a series of events. That, of course, is what we might call it. So some of us might call, in play culture terms, trad gaming rather than classic gaming. Like, it is something that you're meant to sort of be like, oh, now we get involved in this, and then this happens. And it doesn't completely dismiss player agency, but it's very much an assumption that, look, the way this is going to happen is players will follow one lead to the next. There is a thing, I think, it's the psychic wind, or there's possibly, I think it's that one, which it can just like straight up kill you and stuff. You know, this is relatively gentle, but as it says, not everything is balanced. Here is a different adventure to start, the Beach Siombes one, which is, again, this is event triggered. So you see Paleo locking the door. I guess you can just make that happen. You can decide that they're going in the evening. And he takes you in his glass-bottom clockwork boat. That's very cool. And then some Siombes attack you, and it's got a cool spear +1, which can open doors as knock once per day. That is a really cool item. Completely fine, by the way. That is a classic. Oh wow, isn't it too powerful to give like a 2nd level party that, especially because they can't have knock yet, or a 3rd level party? Yeah, they can, but then they've normally only got knock once per day, and it's a really big cost because the wizard the magic user has to have it memorized, or they have to learn it. So surely giving them a repeatable once per day magic item, that's too much. And of course, a repeatable magic item is more resilient than a wand with 15 charges when you find it, I agree. But generally speaking, 1 times knock won't be warping the game. It will be giving the players another choice. And so, yeah, this is good design. It again, like the you end up rescuing the Sphinx thing, or whatever that, you know, that kind of like the Sphinx is hiding in the Belsarisso ship. It's very much like event leads to event leads to event. These are vignette-based adventures. I don't think that means that they are completely fake or ridiculous. It's just these aren't location-based adventures where you have a place you go to. This is the classic dungeon, but it also can work in the context of the wider wilderness crawl adventure as well, where you're like, okay, you're you're in a place and it has its own dynamic, and you make choices about where to go next, and you measure the risk. It's just stuff happens and you try to handle it. That is the event-based, vignette-based situation. There's more hooks. Leonid wants the necklace of Amasayu. The half ogre Otis has it, and yeah, you want my players actually did this. They did a couple of these bits and pieces, and yeah. So it's interesting that it does set up. Oh, you might want to get out. So you know, there's a weird layout decision here about putting that under hooks and that there. But anyway, there is. Yeah, you can see this. All the glitters. Is again laid out like under these subheadings which are bullet pointed, and this is, I just don't think any of this needs to be laid out like this. This is, though it's usable, this is actually less event based, because here you're going to a situation, you're going to a locale, you're going to go and break on. It still forces an event on you. So that's one thing, is for those of us who like the procedurally generated world and only rarely want to sort of tip the scales, is saying, no, there's a psychic storm, that's what needs to happen. Then you have the kind of main dungeon, Deep Warren. It's not very big, it's 14 rooms. And yeah, it's okay. You can see it does have a couple of loops technically. So for instance, if you're coming in here, you can go right, you can go left, and there is a door that takes you centrally. It's actually quite careful, and I mean, I've certainly drawn smaller dungeons like this plenty of times. But this is the centerpiece, and I think there'll be a comparison that's instructive, which I'll make maybe at the end. But yeah, it's a decent dungeon. You have stuff here. There's the gold. I think the gold is variable or marginal. Remember, this is BX, and so only gold and combat, not magic items. And there's no, per second edition AD&D, there's no individual bonus XP. Yeah, you know, you can get some stuff. There's 1,000 gold in one room, 3,000 in another. That, I mean, that's the thing. That's some of the biggest treasure going, and you need to work out how to get it out. So that is the classic challenge. You know, ooh, how do we get out this large, valuable thing that is also got coral growing on it, or whatever it is. 400 GP. The Raz King. Here's one thing: is that from these areas, these vaults, there's kind of a King of Rats type thing there, and there's the garden maze there. Everything is very close together, and though the Monster Zoo is a thing, the Monster Hotel is a thing, it can't, you know, this is a very small dungeon with everything there just to get as many interesting experiences in. It doesn't really have loads of internal logic. Portal to HedgM. Does this I'm trying to remember if this points you. Yeah, so it's got a little rules for hedge maze traveling, taking you to different places. That's fun. It's interesting that it is again a kind of just dump everything in. I'm tempted to do this sometimes. I try to limit this to kind of one special per dungeon. But in a 14-room dungeon, you know, you've got a couple of big things going on. I think, including. Oh, by the way, in the deluxe vault, there's just the chance, if you remove the stinger from the wall, that a celestial returns, and Paleo escapes, but the rest of the island, you know, obviously, there he is. He comes back for his hand. It's maybe just a little over the top. I guess it's one thing is that a big thing about a lot of basic oriented old school play in terms of people using that system is you want to get, like, you either are running super mudcore things, as the phrase goes, mudcore, you know, you're just stuck in the mud, nothing ever gets better. A cliche that's not entirely fair about DCC or Lamentations, you know, you're just some mud grubber, and you're playing copper standard, and you're lucky if your DM lets you pick up a broken scythe blade. but it can also go this way where it's like, oh, let's just get, you know, a bit like Wizards of the Coast realizing, oh, no one actually plays these adventures properly. Why don't we just give them scene-based adventures that have lots of cool stuff that they'll enjoy? They'll have good times, they'll fight good battles, and they'll have a good time watching the movie. This isn't that, but there is a way in which you've got the same thing of like, this is at that end of the basic ecosystem of let's have some cool stuff. Dolmenwood, which I've run a long campaign in, has some similar things where every hex has an interesting location. All these things are interactive. There's lots of stuff. There's lots of secrets. There's kind of a lot of there is a high population of interesting stuff, and the idea you have a 14-room dungeon with a stinger. If you remove a stinger from the wall, the celestial comes out and destroys everything. I think it's a diamond worth 10,000 GP. Here's the thing though, the most valuable thing in the dungeon is a trap. That's also not really good design. The dungeon is fun, it's usable, it doesn't really cohere, and it possibly learns the wrong lesson from Broodmother Skyfortress. The classes, the Old Helsey, are elf types, magic resistance, planar resistance. They start with psionics. They're first level Old Helsey knows 3 psionic powers. They have infra. Astral sailors are adventurers who are just good. Some of this comes up in the second issue as well, but they have sailor skills. They are not thieves, but they're kind of astral thief. There's a lot of, and I actually, though I think through these, several of these examples don't necessarily work as well as they should. There is an admirable ambition to create interesting things that you can that create a niche. Something I saw anecdotally playing both first and second AD&D, and with second AD&D having a big proliferation of both base classes in terms of extra specialist wizards, a functional specialised barbarian, shamans, witch doctors, loads of specialist priests, things like that. All these extra things, some of which were in Unearthed Arcana first, but most of which are new. It also has kits. It has all this stuff going on, and it's really fun and it works, and it doesn't really need to build culture. It doesn't have that issue. However, it's nowhere near as tightly balanced and tightly wound as the first edition set of classes that are in the PHB. And if you're just looking at this book, everything in here is very tightly balanced. There are a few things which you might imagine could be improved. You might say, oh yeah, this could be better or this could be better. Some of that Gary tries to do in the Unearthed Arcana material, but it's all pretty well put together. The Planar Compass and Dolmenwood, in fact, as well, in terms of the official Dolmenwood stuff that's come out via first the Patreon and now Kickstarter with the new classes and so on, is, though there is playtest data for some of it, and in some cases you are talking about multiple groups using it, Dolmenwood, for instance, using that material in playtest, and that helps a lot. There is such a proliferation of this stuff that it is more like, and I say this generously, more like the second edition situation, that there's all this stuff and you don't know exactly how it's going to affect the game, or when you're so if you're in a more sort of play oriented game, by that I mean you're looking at the kind of skill oriented problem solving games, then the mechanical balance of classes matters. And I would just say here, I don't look at the Astral Sailor or the Old Helsey and think they look completely crazy. I think we'll talk about some classes that maybe are a bit wonkier, but I do look at them and think, I don't know necessarily if this is the completely balanced. There's also stuff you can see like 5th edition background stuff coming in here. The Astral Sailor has a 3 and 4 chance of finding a free, however modest, place to sleep, and a 2 and 4 chance of finding someone with valuable information. These are sort of like non-weapon proficiencies, and you see that in basic class builds, in the blogosphere, out in the OSR, that people are always, and I'm not against this necessarily, adding on and twisting and expanding the class. So it's not essentially trying to say, look, you know, so there was the post OD&D elf, dwarf, halfling, etc. And they had their set of class skills, and each of these classes is like that. You know, the sailor skills and the safe harbour, they're like that, and they sort of are, but I think they've got a very slightly different sort of more like that. It is just practically the case that at the table, if someone has a 2 in 4 chance of finding someone with valuable information, that has a completely different effect in terms of the scale of its effect on the campaign than if a dwarf has an X in 6 chance of finding stonework traps or slopes. You know, completely different effects. And that because one is at the meta, particularly because one is at the meta level, one is at the dungeon challenge level. They're more like non-weapon proficiencies in that way, that there are some non-weapon proficiencies which come very close to this. Fast talking, which I do allow in my games, is a bit of this. You know, it's a bit of a deception type skill, which brings it dangerously close to the roll dice to break game social mechanics of the D20 system, 3rd onwards, and of most trad games as well. You look at even Pendragon or whatever, but nonetheless, like, it's fun, you know, it's not completely terrible. I think the idea, there's some good stuff, like this is workable small things. The duelist bonuses are actually pretty good, +2 when fighting an opponent with a sword, but obviously that's not often necessarily, and they don't suffer from unstable surfaces. That matters to do with being on a ship. The Onor is a 1d8 hit die, tough warrior type, can go berserk, has some sailor skills, so they're a demi-thief, but a demi-sailor in this case. The Scion is a human or equivalent with psionics. Psionics, I have not used these psionic rules. I do use psionic rules in my games, but I haven't used these. My impression was that they were okay. Again, I'm cautious. Well, I was cautious when I read them, to the degree that possibly, like, what not had been play tested. I'm sure they had been, but more how widely had they been play tested and how much. Issue 2. This is the hex crawling one. Like I say, this is the get round the multiverse one. It is good to have a summary of the planes, including their so that you can hear where they're from. Particularly, it gives them the distance from Dreamhaven. This is relevant for the hex travel rules, and what portals there may or may not be. These are gate towns. So the Clockwork Port, which we get in Ordo in issue 3, goes to Ordo, the plane of law and time, and Alton's Door goes to Wishery, and that, of course, is referencing Ben Lawrence's Through Alton's Door zine. I think Donwood is mentioned somewhere in here, maybe. Someone might spot it as we go. Oh yeah, Donwood is itself a plane. That's it. Donwood here. Lane Nexus, where the fairy and mortal worlds touch. Goat people, fae, humans, and there's a Dolmen Ring Isle. So you can go to Donwood. So it's in the cute xenosphere kind of thing of inter-referencing these different works. And in sci-fi fantasy, that goes all the way back to, amongst others, but particularly Lovecraft and Howard deciding to have a shared universe and referencing Clark Ashton Smith in it. So yeah, it's nice. A lot of these are obviously not, they've got elemental air, earth, fire, water. HedgM, which we've seen a portal to. The Prime Forge, plane of weaponry, armor, and craft. There's some slightly strange choices, but you know, some of them are more traditional, some of them are twists. Here, so yeah, this is basically about traveling between the planes, and it gives a quite useful summary of some stuff about how to introduce inclusions from the plane, you know, like break-ins, not quite vortices, though they can have portals, but you know, like what happens if there's a pocket of this plane. That's quite good. That is the best thing about the kind of astral sailing section, and the monsters are decent too. We'll look through them a little bit maybe. This is mid-level play, It's an odd one because issue 1 is low level and then issues 2 and 3 are very much mid level. We're in the expert section of BX, and really we're at the level of the game where the game ends. This is, though there's some sense, oh, well, you know, hey, this could go up to all of this. Hey, if you add in full rule cyclopedia stuff, you've got Beck, you know, all the way up to Immortals. You can have level 100 characters. You can have these high-level adventures. But the meat of BX is in the basic and the expert levels 1 to 6, and it does begin to break down after there in terms of what a player's meant to do. How does the more limited rule set, in terms of it mechanically very blunt, handle the higher level stuff? It does say, you know, hey, you could foreshadow stuff and tell people what might happen in the future. It points you towards Planar Compass. Planar breakthroughs, that's the big thing here. You've got rapidly growing barnacles that, can destroy ships and then grow onward. You have a new type of dragon, which are pointed to the main rules about that. You've got Fool's Fire, which are insects which weave webs around your face. Hypnolotals, who are vegetarians but who need corpses to grow their plants in. They need compost. Glass giants, lobnauts, turtle, crab, shark things. Mist mimics, Oliver's Bane, Pasgul, psychic dugong, intelligent herbivores, rock crabs. There's a little comic. Then there's the Keir. The Keir is going to be very important here. It gives you the 3 parts of the Keir: the larva, the pupa, and the imago. Gives you a table of pirate encounters. Now, though, as with other things, you know, I get the faintest sense of like how, you know, exactly what is the playtest quotient here. This is a pretty strong section. Tables are kind of always useful. I'm not against them. I'm not sure. I thought this, you know, Astral Ship Racers on the Unjust with an Old Halcyon captain, Old Halcyon Onor crew. That's fine. It's usable, but it's not very exciting. You know, some of this you come very close to. You could make up yourself, and therefore you don't need the book. You know, the monsters are interesting enough without being amazing. It's obviously meant to step in. This is the Spelljammer Wild Space Flow monsters, particularly, you know, psychic dugongs. I should say I like that the Astral Sea is actually a sea, by the way. That's a sweet kind of idea. But like the Astral dugongs, oh, there's insects. Oh, there's a dragon who kind of might live in an island somewhere in the out in there. There's the major predator, the Keir. There's rock crabs. You know, it is meant to be a mid-level, and you see that with most of the hit die. You know, this. Let's just have a quick look. So, for instance, the Keir pupa is 8 hit dice. A Keir larva is only 1, but there can be plenty of them. That is a very strange artifact there. That is 3-star for the rock crab, and the Lobnaut is 15 star HD. You know, some of these are meant to be quite high level. Some of these are you could have mid level, but of course, if you're using any kind of encounter table, you could. It certainly pushes towards that expert thing of you're out on the oceans. You know, you're out in the wilderness, and that is more dangerous than the dungeon in terms of it's less balanced, and that's an intentional design decision. You have rules. Basically, you're just meant to count this as sailing, but they have unique saving throw types, and there are new weapons. Ballista and Onok flamethrowers. Greek fire. There are lots of ships. The Aldhelsi Drakkar, the Aldhelsi Nar, the Catamaran, the Kawika, the Onorki Mestranza, the Onorki Titan, the Red Hornet, the Skullgar Sloop. That is pretty clearly including the art style, though it looks much more modern in lots of ways. The shading and everything is obviously, I think, meant to point you towards not so much Brom. Who is the other chap? Is it Baxter? No, sure, that's Dark Sun. Who is it? Tell me in the comments. The Spelljammer artist other than Brom that I'm thinking of. Big Tortuga, a Sonic ship where you just make a ship out of your brain. Then there's magic items, cool eggs that can be turned into special boats and can feed people. Special sharing your mind, memories, sharing things. Perfect watch piece. A sword very specifically for cutting astral tethers. A box which has to have 3 things in it, but you'll find those 3 things when you get them. They might be quite valuable magical items. There is a 1 in 6 chance of it having a random magical ring and a telescope, so 1 in 6 chance of it being very good. Otherwise it's kind of naff, though I guess you get 2 gold pieces out of it. Now the main thing, I won't go over loads of this. I'll just get this is the basic principle of this is the travel hex flower. The idea is that when you are traveling the planes, or by this I mean the astral sea, not the planes themselves, you are traveling. This is the core travel hex flower itself. Actually, you travel from a starting point, usually here, and you roll a certain amount of dice, 2d6, 1d12 or 1d4 plus 1d8, and you can see here it tells you where to scatter. 6 and 7 takes you that way, 12 takes you that way, and the general principle is on the travel map you're trying to get to here. On the other maps that may not be the objective, and yeah, here you can see that you have different symbols of different sizes, and the ones that are smaller are further away, so you may be able to evade them. You roll 2d6 on this one, which means that because 6, 7 is back, you're usually going back. However, your sailors and your Onorks can, based on their sailing skill, already detailed in the last thing, use nudge points to nudge it. This is a mini game. This is obviously a way of not having to have an actual hex map of the astral sea. Arguably, given they've got distances for everything, they just could have a hex map. You could have a really gorgeous hex map here. This is meant to be more iterable and requiring less effort, hypothetically. Island in the middle and the shore, getting near to the shore, etc. to get home. There's a weather one. You don't massively want to end up there. That's the stormiest place. There's the start. And the same, and then there is also a determining if you're near any planes, and these are the planes that are most likely to touch on the astral sea: Saunix, Yind, Moors, Ordo, Ficor, the elemental planes, and Ordo. And yeah, so basically you're meant to, when you're traveling, just be regularly rolling these dice to determine the new conditions. What kind of place are you in? There's rules for all this. Now, I grokked this. I got to the point of being like, okay, I think I read it once and was like, wait a second, what? And then I read it again. I was like, yes, I understand. This makes sense. However, it seems like it is probably going to end up being a lot of effort. Even once you know it, because you're keeping the maps up in front of you, compared to having a hex map. Now, there's still questions of generating special events. So that's one thing. Is obviously the overmap is also meant to generate you random encounters. Now, what that makes it very dense, I should say. It is not vessels that can be sighted. There are potentially benevolent and potentially dangerous things. There's an island. Basically, there's always an encounter. There's going to be lots of encounters, because is it once per hour maybe you're checking, and it's a set number of hours based on the speed of your ship. There are perfectly legitimate rules for that in this, to get there. So it's an encounter dense thing, and that's okay, but maybe pushing the rhythm a bit of the game, pushing against the rhythm. So though this is clever, this is meant to, and there's some Gygaxian in using one roll for 2 things. This is using you both for distance and for encounter. There's a kind of a potential problem with that, but you're also checking using different dice systems for weather and nearby plane. So you start in the astral sea, and you may get, you're going to be nearer one of these. You can see you roll the d12, and you've got a 50% chance of moving. Now, of course, that may mean it's then a 1 in 12 chance, an 8% chance, whatever that is, chance of being pushed back. If you move away, you may be pushed back to the astral sea itself. But yeah, there's just it's that you're actually not rolling one die to determine whether location, encounter, or this kind of super dense die roll, which you see a few examples of in like the surprise roll in first edition. Here you are instead kind of still having to do 3 rolls and work out all the information every time, and that's going to be many times per journey because there's a high you're generating at every aperture or whatever it is. You then this is a good section fitting into that theme is that you have the different planes starting with the astral sea, and then I'll just look at this one as the example. Elemental air, the bright ether, the dimension of endless sky and wind, tells you what this kind of area is going to be like. The kind of, this is what the sea and the air look like, and the kind of island there might be, non-hazardous weather equivalents. If there's a natural hazard result, you might capsize. Pretty brutal. That's the your ship's saving throw, save versus wind. And yeah, potentially benign encounters, sentient cloud, Ginny, silver dragon, potentially dangerous ones, blah blah blah. You get the idea. Here on a D12 table, the 9 to 12 are advanced fantasy monsters in terms of the old school book series where Gavin Norman added in AD&D monsters that weren't in basic. That points, I think, to old school essentials, and this with no marker is within the book itself. If it's PC 1, if it's Planar Compass 1, that also has a marker. So yeah, this is all nicely presented, usable. Other than that, of course, it's not really scoped for a lot of play. There is one island, 1 in 8 chance of a stable portal to the plane of elemental air. There are a couple of events that the encounter tables are not actually very big, and it is quite possible you'll be in a particular terrain for quite a while, but it's only a 50% chance you move. Some of them, there are multiple hexes on that map. You then look at the main hex flower map, which is the one that you are using to travel to your destination, i.e. that one, and there's lots of encounters on it. So you're going to run through this pretty quickly. Like, actually, the amount of content being offered here, though it's evocative and it is literally usable, a lot of it is really usable for one session. And you're going to have to start refreshing it pretty quickly, I think it's fair to say. It's certainly not bad. There's a lot of good in that. I wouldn't use the hex flower system, though I see what seems to be the elegance. I'd be tempted to, because it's what this is designed with, and I like using design systems, but it's over-engineered, I think. And the content, though leading, though positive, doesn't really do the job in the final event. You might get hunted. There is like a whole set of rules about being hunted by the Kyr. Let's just go back to that. So basically, if the Kyr, where does it say that? Encounters, standard encounters, here we go. Basically, there are special rules. You put a Kyr counter, which is obviously your strange astral leviathan that wants to eat stuff. You put it on the map and it can follow you around, and it's following you based on the HD divided by levels of the sentient beings on the vessel. That is your psychic load. Sonic characters are doubled. You can mask in various ways. A magic item called Psychic Ambergris does that. And yeah, if you end up in the same hex, then you have an encounter. If it's swallowed, then you have a new hex flower. You start here, and you're trying to get there basically to destroy the. So it kind of it's its own mini game. Again, I actually prefer the hex flower here because the hex flower is obviously really a version of node space or something like that. It's one of those. It's not like, oh, there's a number of nodes you check for before you get to the next encounter, but it's a similar abstracted move system. and it's one of those that presses more towards the uncertainty of location. This is not a map, nor is the other hex flowers. They're representations of the things that might happen to you on the way and the amount of distance you have to go, because you're going to have to make a certain number of rolls. So they are meant to elegantly factor in different things. Here, where there is a single map, this works better, I think. There is the thing about which zone you're rolling in. This is a 2d6 one again, I think. And then it has a key for each number, but there may be more than one of each depending on the particular thing. And basically, yes, you're trying to probably get to 17, the cranium, to kill the pupa, or the larva, sorry, which is the brain of the whole thing, which makes, in general, the whole thing stop working. Obviously, as you go deeper into the rooms, into those different zones, things get more dangerous. There's an encounter engine for this, which, depending on what zone you're in, you are more likely to get worse results based on rolling a d20. You also have not detailed rules for if you roll doubles, there might be healing flora, abandoned treasure, or a discovery. These are not themselves detailed, though you just have to make them up. There's some extra stuff: cavity size, cavity shape. There's some traps, d8 table of traps, and there's a d10 table of NPCs you can introduce. That may be found. That's at the end of the book, or the main section of the book. Yeah, the kit is. You can sort of just skip through that. The kit is okay as a monster. It's interesting how much of the book is taken up on describing the Kier dungeon, which is all about the fact that when you're travelling on this weird abstracted map, there is a monster who's always hunting you. I don't know if that's actually the experience I want from, sailing, from Planescape, from Spelljam, or whatever we're doing. But it's a bold choice. It partly works. I think it works better than the main travelling system. There's a mini game system at the end for rolling a d20, adding the bonus and any bonuses that come off this table potentially in the future. And looking here, there is slightly wildly, rather than it being 1 to 2 fish bites per monsters chasing it, which you might expect, it's just 13 to 14. It is that essentially, as soon as you get bait, you are more likely to have an encounter with something based on nearby planes than you are to actually just meet a fish, in terms of the range of results you can get. But yes, obviously the higher the bonus, I guess, the more likely again you are to get anything. But bargaining fish gives you another bonus. Clock crab, you become a month younger. You can eat a lot of them, I guess, to undo magical aging. A scallop might have a pearl within, doesn't give value. There's a number of small things like that where you don't actually get the detail you think you are going to get or you expect. Okay, let's look at issue 3 finally. This is the first plane they've done, Ordo, and like the cover, like the back with the Beatles. Inside cover you have the 21-hour day with the hour names: purity, rising, ignorance, frustration, contemplation, choice, etc., etc. Index of monsters, details about the issue, and details about how to do it. That's been the same on everything. So it has 2 more classes. It has the Choid, who we've met in the first issue, but here it's a class, and the Time Priest, who we haven't met before, but is a caster type, a divine caster. We have a lengthy spell list, which is nearly a quarter, a fifth maybe it's about a fifth of the whole book. And then we have as I said, the gate town to Ordo, the Clockwork Port, which is the closest of the locations to Dreamhaven. So you're obviously meant to connect it to that and to the Hex Flower travelling system. And then the cathedral is in the Clockwork Port, and then the rest of those places, the Time Well, Kingdom of Ritus Divinus, the Great Wheel, are in Ordo itself. So the Choid. Here, I think there's just a slight sense to me that a couple of the things that I've worried about before, three things I mentioned as slight niggles or concerns at points. One is the weight of balance. How far these things fit onto the normal curve of BX as a game, not as a sort of experiment in having cool concepts, but a game. One is the layout thing to do with bullet pointing, let's call it, and other things, and white space. And the third is content and usability. You know, how much stuff is there, you know, how much detail is there for you to use, come up several times here for me. And the Choid is a clockwork being spawned from the sands of order itself, and they have to be lawful until they're level 8 or something. They can then configure themselves into either a priest type, who is pretty similar to a time priest, except they've got a capped AC of 5 and their D6 hit die. They could and that you have to pay to change your configuration. The soldier, capped AC of 3, but can have actually can dual wield quite efficiently. Has damage reduction from their armor, or they can be an infiltrator who has some thief skills, invisibility once a day, and some free encumbrance. Oh, and locate object once per day. So they are also very quick, movement rate 120/40, which for AC 7 is pretty good, and with that encumbrance load. There are obviously twists on core classes, not the wizard, but the other classes. And there's the infiltrator. There's some nice art there. As a class, this is very powerful. Saying, oh, it's a downside, they have to be lawful or this or that, or it costs them money to reconfigure, is given they're also immune to poison. They get a +1 positively, that is, to any reaction roll because they're famous for being honest. Yeah, I would say that you are looking at what is just probably a must-have if you're looking at this as a game, a must-have class. It's just, and it's only on the fighter. It's only on the fighter XP ranking, and the biggest downside is its low hit die, D6. But remember, that's not that bad. I mean, it depends. If you roll a 1 at level 1 and a 2 at level 2, then you don't really want to go into soldier mode very often. But you can still dump high con in there for what it's worth. The Time Priest has a bunch of things going on, like they have a 2 in 6 chance of revealing highlights when they touch something for a turn. That's reduced over time. They can adjust things using the turn undead table and move people back up to a turn. Some of these things, this isn't so much it, but some of the spells that are like this to do with time manipulation are, I don't know, they may be inspired a bit by the Chronomancer supplement for 2nd edition. But certainly some of them look like they have a fairly high efficiency punch for combat in a 5th edition style. Like there are touches of influence there that may not be direct, absolutely, but I wonder. They can at 4th level also start turning undead as if 3 levels lower. They can skip ahead once a day. They are on the not quite. I'm trying to remember in BX. They're based on a magic user chart nearly. 2,400 is the Paladin 2,400. Yeah, they only start getting spells at 2nd level. So one thing is that at 1st level they have Chronomancy, and that's about it, basically, and Time Sense, which means they can affect a single roll for the next 1 round per level, 1 single roll. So they have a couple of powers, and they have okay saves, not amazing, best is 11, and they have D6 hit die. What you could say is that is not as good as a cleric at 1st level. Fair enough. But the Time Priest doesn't feel as wonky in that respect to me as the Choid. The Choid just seems very good. But the Time Priest just seems over-engineered with lots of stuff going on, like lots of powers. You're also adding in an entire new spell set. There's the laws here. So basically, these are, some of them are spells you already have, but you have new distances and new ranges and new areas of effect, etc. And lots of new spells. And some of them are pretty decent. Some of them definitely feel, as I say, like they're fitting into a different, let's call it a different meta, game-wise, than even lots of BX players play, certainly. Yeah, it is not, and I'd say the classes in the first issue I think are better, and they do integrate nicely if you're doing it with the astral sailing stuff. I'd be happy, by the way, to give the astral sailor and Onor some sort of advantage with the equivalent of the nudge power, even if I wasn't using the hex flower system. They're obviously built for that. That's an additional power they gain if you use issue 2. The Clockwork Port is a gear-shaped island. It does have a map. There we go. 5 locations. It is even less detailed than Dreamhaven, though it does have one. It has a dungeon-like environment in the cathedral. The rest here, yeah, you can see it's a similar thing. Notable figures. There is a quest that Donag slowly needs someone to help her. The machine shop. There's a secret, which, yeah, you can learn more about Chanacoids, and she's got a quest she wants to go to Hypnos, which is the home of 6 Hypnolotl, and that's for a 4th level party, 5th level party. It's 5,000 GP and a spell scroll. Amazing. I guess you can just have there be more than 10 pounds of soulweed, but that's all she's offering as far as I can tell. It's okay. There's a couple of locations in the commons. There's the Divine Gate itself, which takes you through to Ordo. Then we go to the cathedral. The cathedral is the Cathedral of Sant Sacerdos Quadrangenti Septuaginta Duo Milia. It's the centre of power for the Church of Ordo outside of the plane of law and time. It's on the Astral Sea. And tells you when some certain events happen, gives you the sections, and then there's a map. The basement is another small map, though it seems briefly like it's going to be a dungeon. It's itself only 4 locations, I think. So it is a dungeon map in the sense. I mean, there are guards, there are things you have to bypass. There is the inner vault needs you basically to have wish magic or some incredible power or have bribed someone. So there's challenges in there, but it yeah. As the centerpiece location of, compared to even the Dream Warren, the Deep Warren, it's as the centerpiece location for the Clockwork Port. It feels pretty thin. It's partly because they want to move on and get into Ordo, the plane of time and law. But as I say, this is one of the things that I'm observing, that I feel or I judge, is that sometimes you're just dealing with it's kind of cool stuff, you can use it, but there's not many sessions of good content in it. It's thin. So Ordo, the plane of law and time, has a few locations on it. It tells you, by the way, what happens through the day. This is kind of fun. I feel like there's a couple of editing things. I think on another page there's something which requires you to know. I think it's in the library, in the library in the cathedral. You need to know the calendar, and you need to be able to work out how that connects to the cathedral. Except you don't have. It doesn't even explain this relates to the hours of the day necessarily. It just says, when the shelf is in its place, and then there's a couple of vague points like that, which feel like a line editing, copy editing thing. The Great Wheel has 21 spokes. You get a tiny bit more on that. The Kingdom of Ritus Divinus, you get a bit more on each of these. Ritus Divinus is a popular tourist destination for interplanar sightseers. The Time Well is it's actually a prison, which at the bottom of which is the potential, what may be the new version of Ordo, because Ordo is a dead god who perhaps died to create the universe or something. The Kalago is this. This can attack you anywhere. You don't have any rules, I think. I don't remember. I don't believe there's any rules for encounters really here. So it's not clear how you're meant to use those. The Dunes of Enlightenment, if you go out into the dunes themselves without kind of special protections, There are things that can happen, memory storms, Mercury rain, heretic raids, and you might find the Trove of the Heretics, which, yeah, goes up to the Mercury Ocean. Time heretics, the Jacqueline mystics, who I think it's that they basically want to destroy the world because they want Ordo to be reborn so the world ends or something, or that there's some, you know, there's some Catharism going on or something. There's a picture of the Chacanoid heretic and the Mercury Sea with the Clockwork Sea Worm. 8-hit die can, yeah, big bite attack can squeeze, which is 1d10 hull damage, so it's a ship damage, obviously intentionally meant to be like, okay, this lets us use the ship rules more, which we've also had in the second issue with the astral sailing. Electric weakness, fire immunity, spell immunity. And there's a few of those examples actually. Like, the monster design tends to try to come up with a good monster concept that's memorable, visually memorable, and which you have to shift your pattern of attack to if you're fighting it. And in terms of the combat monsters, that's good. Not that they need to be endlessly fascinating, but just there are new challenges. That can be exaggerated. You can say, oh, well, everything has to be a unique, amazing encounter. Reskin everything. And you're like, no, vanilla has its place. And also basic has its place. Things that are not just vanilla, but simple, that you understand. And which, if they are challenges, and the extreme version of this is a different gimmick, the Tucker's Kobolds, which I've definitely run before. But the idea, no, they're just a tribe of kobolds, that's okay, let's make that interesting. Yeah, I talked a bit about this in some of my recent D&D podcasts. Okay. That's fun. You get a bit on the Great Wheel is the Vatican, basically. This is where people come through. There are some Crusaders. These are the locations for different stuff within that you can see. Within the Great Wheel, yeah, quite memorable, quite fun. Ritus to Venus, you have sands of endless desert on the banks of a lake of liquid mercury lies a feudal society of Chanacoids. And yeah, you've got some people. The court jester, the head of guest affairs. She's apparently mercurial, but we don't hear very much more about her. There is apparently a very important secret. There's lots of tunnels underneath the place. I don't think this comes up at all. Every day the king dies, and there's a funeral, and then they have a party when he comes back. There's the map, obviously meant to be very visually striking. I think it's probably doing a bit too much. There's a Mercury Lake. And this is the key for this. I think is it, which page is it's, I think it's the king. This, by the way, this is another thing where this is very few words for the key stuff about this kingdom. Given the space, I know you could say, but this means that secrets is at the top right-hand corner of the column. It's at the top of the column. But basically, just give me more stuff. You've got like nearly half a column. Give me a sentence more about each of these characters. This is also a smaller text than this, so you're already messing around with layout. The bullet pointing is obviously losing you space, and this is what was what made me think of Echoes from Fomalhaut, which I haven't spoken about this. I've spoken about Zintalan by Gabor Lux. But here, you might say, this is much less intuitive and useful. But actually, in practice, two things. One, it's not bad. You just learn to read, like, there's a number. You find the number. As long as it's edited properly, this is easy to find. The bolding does enough work to tell you what to look at from the key. But this also with sample hit points. This is a great feature. The pages are much more dense, and that is not a bad thing. There is no way that I'm going to be convinced that someone giving me more information in a similar number of pages. In PDF, this is 48 pages. This is 72, Planar Compass 3. There is more detail in Echoes from Fomalhaut 2 than there is in Planar Compass 3, despite the PDF size being its 2/3 the size. So, yeah, I think this is a problem and can be explained, I think, as an abuse or a misunderstanding, misuse of the Old School's Essentials line style. There's not very much to do in Ritus to Venus. There is. You can see the stuff that could happen there. There is stuff like pay 20 gold for something that has no effect, or you can dodge and attack. That's fun, but like that's very expensive for someone to shine your armor. It does suggest that the economics here aren't making lots of sense. The accommodation at least is going to waste people's money, which is good. If they want to stay there, then that's not necessarily bad. You know, to say, look, there are living costs associated. Remember, the DMG has is it 100 GP per week per level or something mad? That's one of those things that, you know, I've certainly neglected at points. Yeah, you could get someone to draw your memories. Okay, that's not very actionable. You can joust. There's a mini game for that. We'll get to that in a second. There's a castle, but there's no details about the castle. There's a village, and they're not very happy in the village. And there's a little comic. The time well. This tells you about as I say, this tells you about the fact that there are different kinds of criminals on each level, the prison levels, because time dilates as you go down. Vigilance of Ordos, which are 10 feet tall Chanakoids tasked with guard. I'll get the picture of that up. It's not a bad picture. This is very Modron-like, obviously. The actual Chanakoid you can play is not like all these weird Chanakoids. Oh no, that's the Messenger of Ordo, that one that you can see there. The levels, pardon me, go down and down. So, at the edge of eternity, everywhere except at the Hall of Justice, time flows at 1/3 the speed of time in Ordo. Level 4, it's 1/5. Level 3, it's 1/8. Level 2, it's 1/13. Level 1, it's 1/21. And in the Accursed Pit, it is standing still. And the Accursed Pit has the Traitor, a clockwork child with glowing gold eyes and a faint radiant aura. The Traitor doesn't know why it's a traitor. It's just been told it is, so it believes it. This is it. Also in the pit, there is a +3 shield with time abilities and a 130,000 gold piece, massive turquoise called Ordo's Tear. So yes, they're keeping this child there so as not to end the universe. That's kind of a fun dynamic. There's very minimal. Yeah, I can skip forward. There's stuff like in some cells here. There's 6 skeletons. Your character's level 5. There's no treasure. Here, 3 pieces of jewellery, 1,000 gold each, but no encounters. You could encounter guards, so that's the one thing. Is there's some wraiths, but no treasure. 3 wraiths is at least a challenge. I'm just not yet. This is very half-baked. Basically, Ordo itself, in the same way that Ritus Divinus, there's not very much detail on what can you do there, I don't know. The time well, similarly, is just pretty vague, I think. And there is, at the very end, I say, look at this nice art. There is a jousting game with three Chanakoid knights you could fight. These are giant clockwork beetles you can use. This is useful at least. But here, the jousting procedure is that you have to stop your stopwatch versus your actual opponent, which may be the DM if it's an NPC, as close to 12 seconds as possible. And you can either hit or knock them out depending on how close you are. And if you win, you get 2,000 gold. So yeah, it is a non-diegetic game. It's there as a gimmick. It's people like these. Sometimes I've occasionally used these. I stray away from them now generally, not always, but here this is the one thing you can actually do in this place, and it's not actually D&D. And I think it sums up what I think the third issue plainly struggles with those kinds of issues of getting enough information in, making it really worth the read, having a setting that works and is interesting. Like, you've got 2 classes which I don't think quite work. You have a location and plane, both of them really interesting. The concepts for the Clockwork Port and Ordo are really interesting. 1 or 2 of the hooks and ideas work quite well, but it's all a bit vague. And with the time well, you get to the point where it just looks like it's, except for the specific purpose of going and finding Ordo and ending the universe, or maybe not ending the universe, but getting the turquoise tier, which is certainly worth going down for. Albeit time is slowing, so that means time is going quicker above, which means that, you know, by the time you get to the bottom, how much time is now, or once you've stolen this tier, is it 1,000 years? I don't know, doesn't say. Yeah, the time when is kind of actively a poor dungeon, and the cathedral is a very limited thing. You might need to steal stuff and go in there. It gives enough detail to get on with stuff, but it's essentially the ideas are sparking, but it doesn't come together. I think the first issue is probably the strongest. The third issue is the weakest. I don't assume this is an inevitable decline, but I think there are the issues that bump along the whole trio are most pronounced in issue 3. And I don't know if like the kind of delays that happen in Kickstarters and whatever else, and whatever issues the team have faced have affected that. But it certainly is. It's worth bearing in mind. You're going to have to put work into the third issue, especially to make it really hum. Issue 2 has good monsters and some good ideas for planar intrusions. But I think most people are going to end up wanting a different sailing or exploration mechanic. Not everyone, some people will love it. Issue 1 you can use much more out of the box. I would look forward to more of these. It'd be nice to see that the next plane or whatever it is perhaps just a bit more robust and a bit more detailed. Anyway, if you've read these, tell me what you think in the comments and tell me other zines you enjoy, and I'll see you next time.